up all night. Just not
That's
sleep.
because all you guys kind of snooze all the long talking I have to do on ridiculous thing.
The 28 pages.
28 pages.
Yeah.
I'm going to go horse. Let me know when you're ready, Scott. All right, cool. We're on there. So welcome, everyone. I'll call this work session to order, and we will talk about the construction updates. Charles and Jennifer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. For those on here, I'm Charles Eaton, the engineering director, and this is Jennifer Garbely, the assistant city engineer. And we actually are here tonight. We haven't done this in a while, although we give you a big construction update on everything that's going. Originally, it kind of started out, we were just going to give you an update on the parks, but we decided to expand it and let you know about everything that's tentatively on the schedules for calendar year 2018. And it ended up being a lot more than I
that little two-page memo in there, I was like, that can't be right.
Oops. My screen is locked. There we go. So first up is the emergency bridge replacement that's currently under construction. I do have a slideshow with some pictures and things, but basically it's ahead of schedule. The new bridge is set to open up to traffic by the end of the month. And he'll start demoing the old bridge in July. The only thing that will probably keep him until the fall out there is planting. So he'll be pretty much wrapped up this summer while he's out there. So if you haven't been out there, there's a picture of some of the new rails that are wrapped in plastic for curing, but that's the rounded arch rail, concrete rail design that you guys selected. And so all the rails have been poured. They just haven't poured the little pilasters, which are the gaps in between.
Yeah, it looks great.
So they don't have very many pours left as far as the bridge itself. I think they have the pilasters and the moment slab is it. So the other project is the bank repair.
Before you leave that, so how long will the bridge, the tear down of the old bridge take?
Less than a month.
Less than a month.
Is what they're saying. By end of July, they say they pretty much will be wrapped up.
Yeah.
They do have to construct the temporary retaining walls yet off of ODOT's bridge. Mm-hmm. So there'll be some more pile driving and stuff out there related to that during that in-water work window. So.
But the road rerouting to the new bridge will all be done this month, and traffic will start going.
Yeah, June and July, right? So I don't think they'll have the Washington Street ramp totally done until they get part of the old bridge ripped out.
Okay, great. Well, it looks great.
But it will still be open to traffic, fully usable. But right now they're telling us like a 2-day turnaround for closure.
Yeah, so minimal closures for this next month in order to transfer people over to the new bridge. He was really trying to keep it open, but he hasn't anticipated anything yet. I usually get a 3-week lookout. So this next Thursday will be critical to see if he's got any upcoming planned closures.
Next project is the bank repair project. The permits are basically approved. I actually got an email just today that I'll have them in my hands by June 11th from SHPO and the Corps for the extra work down here. This is kind of an artist rendering. The staircase has been widened out. It's a full 10-foot wide now. Plus things, so you should be able to it's a nice wide staircase like you asked for. Bid plans should be given to us this week, and we'll be out to bid hopefully next week. So that one is on track for construction during their in-water window is the same as the bridge, July 1st through October 31st. So that's kind of how that bank repair will look. The Kronberg multi-use path, final plans are in review. We got them yesterday. So we'll be able to start looking at those and see if there's last changes. We expect to bid it in July, maybe August, depending on permits. The permits are pending, of course, with ODOT, ourselves, building ourselves, So there's quite a few permits still left to be gathered on it. There is a few renderings here they put together. I don't know how many of you guys got to look at the virtual open house that's up online, but these are all kind of there. They're kind of cool little renderings of how potentially this finished structure will look as it goes through the tree canopies and off the various parts.
So is the tree removal that has to happen?
No.
Or not yet?
There's actually only, right now we're projecting only 3 trees in the park that will have to be removed. There are several in ODOT's right away, but not in the park itself. We're hoping we can salvage the rest of them with just pruning, because we're trying to keep everything as close to the structure as possible to keep that appearance.
So I talked to Tanya at NCPRD, and she had wanted to move some plants that are in the pathway.
She planted some saplings that she wants to move, and she's been working with Jennifer Backhouse and making sure that happens. So their fear now is they may not live, but they could also transplant them to a nursery and keep them until fall.
Right.
To put them back in the ground.
Right. Right. Okay. Good.
They have been working. They have identified all the saplings that would be in the way that the NCPRD had planted out there at some point.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
The South Downtown project is one of the big unit. It's kind of one of the big beasts too that we have coming up this summer. That's actually been split into 2 contracts, so just to be aware of that. The railroad crossing the road, the storm and everything is going to be the first unit that will be out. The plaza itself is delayed, so it'll be under a separate contract that will go out later in this fall after we get some more vetting and all the different looks of that it's going to look like. Some of the things we're still missing on that is electrical designs from PGE. Our contractor is working on a unified traffic control plan. And the another thing to note here is the Washington Street Storm Project. If you recall, that one was originally going all the way from the post office all the way up to Oak Street. We've split that into 2 projects because of this South Downtown unit. And we're going to do everything from the railroad tracks, post office with this, and we've postponed the other part from the railroad tracks up to Oak to future years to buy us a little bit of time, and so we don't impact as many city streets. The traffic control is becoming quite challenging, to say the least. The good news on that is, from our perspective, our traffic control engineers have come up with an idea on how to keep Washington 2-way during construction. It will mean some nighttime work for us and intermittent closures down to 1 lane as we do specific tie-ins, but we won't have the, I think we gave you the doom and gloom thing that it would be closed to 1 lane for 6 months. So they've got some ideas right now that is not how we have the plan set up. So and the piece from coming up the hill would be 2-lane until we actually reconstruct that piece from Main to the highway. Do it all as well.
Chuck, during that period, is there going to be any parking on, is that Washington?
We are still proposing to keep parking on the north side.
Okay.
Until such time that we reconstruct the north side. And then the south side will be completed at that point. Some of that will interplay with Axle Tree's designs on what they're using at that particular time, so I'm not really sure when that crossover happens and if there will be a short time frame where there'll be no parking on the 1 block where Axle Tree is while we're reconstructing the north side, but that would be the only time frame that we're looking at this point.
Thank you.
And what's your timeline for going out on Unit A bids?
So, Unit A, good segue.
Okay, that's what I'm here for.
Unit A, we're at 90% plans right now. We're looking at trying to open that in July, get bids back by the end of July. Unit B is just in concept plans right now, and there's an open house scheduled for June 26th. to go over some of those concept designs. So that's the status of those two things. But like I said, we are a little bit concerned in the fact that we still are waiting for electrical designs from PGE, so we have a few hurdles still to overcome, even on Unit A, with the number of different contractors involved trying to get us designs.
Are they taking longer than normal?
The normal?
The normal, no. I think they're working pretty fast compared to normal, but they do have to coordinate with Comcast and whoever else is on their polls to make sure they have room for everything.
I mean, when we were looking at the library, I think it was 8 weeks. So it's taking, there's a lot of construction. They've got a lot of pressure going on right now with all their development that's happening out.
And remember, we're asking them to underground all of this. So all of this area is going underground. So they're doing conduit designs. They're trying to figure out their transformers, everything. So, and then some of the buildings are overhead services and have to stay overhead services because the building drop is in the middle of the building. So they have to figure out how to do a lateral, a service line that it starts as underground and ends up on a pole to get overhead into the building. So there is a little bit of complexity involved. Next one is on the list is the clay pipe replacement project. Those plans are complete, sitting on my desk. They're just basically waiting for me to finish assembling a bid package. So those should be going out anytime. This project is actually critical and supports both the high school and Northwest Housing. There's a little bit of reconfiguration of the storm and sanitary sewers. But you can see as that map, it's a lot smaller than I hoped. But the really dark lines in the map are all the different lines that we're replacing as part of this clay pipe project. And this does complete the cores work, so only the Waverly Heights one is left once this one's done. Next projects are the 2018 SAFE projects. The Selwood project, we're hoping to bid in July. You'll see that is kind of the theme. July and end of June to 1st of August is going to be extremely busy for us. We have a lot of projects that'll be on the street at that particular time. We're targeting to complete the Madison Street segment of this before school starts and the rest by November. That project is this section of roads that connects Milwaukee Elementary with the park on 35th.
Century Park.
Yep.
Right.
It creates a complete ADA accessible corridor through that area. The other project we have this summer is the Ardenwald project. Again, it will be bidding in July. The path to the school through the blocks is the piece that we are scheduling to be done before school, with the remaining in November. It's split into two little sections on here, paving the pathway between the two blocks, and then constructing the portion of the street missing to get a full circle around the school.
So on that pathway between the blocks, are you doing it pervious?
Yes.
Or how are you?
It's pervious because there's no way to do it.
There's no way to do storm. Yeah. I figured.
That's actually where we're trying out that new material, the recycled tires. So to see how that works.
Cool.
I haven't walked it. Is it a clear path right now, or is there some
It is
conversation with property owners that it's going to happen?
They pretty much fenced it.
Okay.
But I mean, the kids use it like crazy. I was out there the other day, and I couldn't believe how many kids were on that path right at the end of school.
Good.
But it is really narrow. It's only 5 feet.
Yeah, I was wondering what kind of machine you were going to use to get through there.
In that recycled thing, they pretty much use wheelbarrows is what they...
That's all right.
But no matter what you do, you're going to be using wheelbarrows. If you were doing concrete, I guess you could pump it maybe, but that'd be about it. It's the only way it wouldn't be a hand job. And then other projects that we have coming up, the 2018 paving project, the SSMP paving project, is in design development right now. We still have a little bit of ways to go. We're a little worried on that one because we didn't get to it as fast as we would have liked, and we do not want to be bidding too late in the summer. So we'll continue to work on that.
And what streets are on that? Your report said that.
Yeah, it's in the report in the text form, but so those are all the streets we're looking at. Some of those streets may fall off if there become complexities in stormwater management, but they're 29th, the entire length of 29th, Fir Crest, the area around Harvey and Leon Lane, that little loop, Omark, which is a challenging one in itself with all the heavy truck traffic on it, and Lake Road.
Lower Lake Road.
Lower Lake Road.
Oh, a lot of people will be excited to hear that.
When you say the full length of 29th, I'm curious if has there been any coordination at all with Portland on the northernmost end of that, which is in Portland?
Right, so we would stop at the city limit line,
Okay.
unfortunately.
That's the worst part of the entire road, is that one little section. It's gravel now. It's completely deteriorated. So we're going to stop, and there's going to be an abrupt edge at the city line, and it will immediately drop to gravel. So
Those kind of things, you see that a lot. Have governments ever talked about like having little agreements where, yeah, we're going to pave that block of your thing and you pay us for the cost of it?
well,
Be happy.
we paved a little bit of that's what we did when we did the 28th connection to the spring water, because that's not inside of Milwaukee.
Yeah, it is.
Not
It is, I think.
It's also inside the city limits. The city of
It isn't.
Portland
There's
Park
part of it
is
that's in
all there,
Portland.
but it's all inside the city.
If you look at the county line, I think, at the city county line, I think we'd be very surprised to see that we actually did encroach onto just,
So in any case, back to my question.
I spent several years negotiating contracts with other cities in order to pave sections or to maintain them or to plow them or to do sanitary pickup. You can absolutely create interlocal agreements, and you can create shares. Part of the issue, though, for us right now is that you have an engineering team that is busy. And so having those types of agreements formulated take time. Significant time based on some of our past interactions. So
not going to happen for 29th.
probably not going to happen for 29th. We can make a call. We can do a single call to say, hey, just so you guys know, we are paving this. It'd be great.
here's a
if
picture
you
of your road.
Here's your section, and here's how ours is going to look. And I think that's probably about as far as we can go this year, just based on workload. But
And really, it would tie in well when we, and I don't know where it is on the list, but when we do share it.
No, you're not.
Because there's pieces of share it that the city limit line is in the middle.
Right.
There's pieces of share it where the city, that's all in Portland.
Right.
Which is your piece, I believe.
Right.
And then there's other pieces of share it where it's in Milwaukee. So that street itself is interesting.
Also, maybe this will just be a good example for why they should work with us. Yes. Okay.
They could end up making a lot of phone calls to the city.
Oh, I'm sure it will. I can.
If you do prepare that, would you CC me on it?
yeah.
And I'll put it in a phone call.
But it's going to literally, the only commitment I can make today is that we'll send an email. Otherwise, we can't go any further.
Since I live right there, I would mind being CC'd on.
You would like to be as well.
I'd like to share with my Portland neighbors that
They should
this
make
is
some phone
happening,
calls.
but not on your part of it.
The Rusk Road HMA, the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program, that's bidding right now, so that's supposed to open next week for the demolition and restoration of the area within Mount Scott Creek for that house in that area.
So it's just the one house that ultimately
It is just the one lot that ultimately did.
And they're vacated and they're out of there.
We do have taken possession, so.
And is that something where you just contract it out? It's not something where we're going to look for volunteer work parties to do planting? in the
Yeah,
fall
I'm
or
pretty
something?
restricted with FEMA on how we do it. It's just all contracted out.
Okay.
Has to be through their procurement process.
Okay.
So has to be competitively bid, even though it's under our thresholds, it doesn't under theirs. So The slurry sill project we have actually postponed until next year, primarily because with the new CIP, we have brought them all together. So we've taken what was in last year's CIP as I think 150,000 and made it to 500,000. Maintenance is not, or Public Works does not have all those crack sealed yet, so we need to give them some time to get those streets crack sealed so we can actually service seal. Home street sewer improvements, that one's another one that's been delayed. And what I've done here is actually kind of the last, these are actually projects that weren't in your staff report, but other projects that were on the current CIP, just to give you a heads up of what has transpired with them, whether they are or not happening. The home street sewer improvements with the integrated, has been integrated with the new CIP and is actually in a later year now. With the paving of Home Street, so it's been combined. The Meek Street storm system, that is still underway, but it's still hung up in right-of-way acquisition. That's one reason you'll see addition to the budget memo that we are asking for a transfer of funds because we are expecting to underspend this year because we thought the right-of-way would be done. It's still in with Union Pacific Railroad, so that's where we are with that. And then the Plum and Apple storm system improvements are in the final design phases now. Actually, we just don't have a person available to get back onto that project. It's literally our problem. McBride improvements are also in railroad negotiations still for all the crossings of McBride, so we're still negotiating those. Hemlock storm system has been reprioritized in the new CIP with a new date, as well as the water system improvements that were scheduled this year. They've been pushed back a couple years for the wells, for the well work. So that was kind of the status I wanted to give you of the other projects that were in the current CIP. So yeah.
So what is the prognosis on McBride?
It'll happen. It's just that we have a lot of, that's a combined unit, right? We're doing storm, water, and street. So the ADA accessibilities require us to open up the ODOT rail orders to get pedestrian access across the railroad tracks. That, of course, then opens up negotiations with the railroad for what that crossing is going to look like. Is it a rubberized? Is it a concrete? Is it an asphalt, et cetera? And then I think we have a lot of water line crossings of those tracks that we're making sure that they're okay with us. Right now, we're proposing to bore them all, so he doesn't have to pull tracks up, and we try to stay out of negotiations with those, but it's still crossing things that need to be discussed with him, and I have not had a chance to start that particular discussion with him yet. So I've started the discussions with ODOT Rail, and then we're just going to file the paperwork and get going.
So ODOT Rail doesn't just get, I mean, we still have to negotiate with him individually. It's not just getting ODOT.
Basically what I found out from ODOT Rail is that, because I asked about it on the Main Street one, because Union Pacific has tentatively approved the design for dropping the grade underneath the rail line there. We still have to get the permit from ODOT Rail, but basically if you don't end up in an agreement with any active railroad, you have to challenge it, and ODOT Rail says that's a 2-year process in order to actually override the railroad saying no to something. So,
is this where we get the phrase, I was railroaded? Working with the railroads is the most difficult.
So you really want a cooperative arrangement to where you agree to what you're going to do, so they agree with you. Because then the permit gets approved in a couple weeks. So, any other questions on the things outstanding? Look at my head.
You're doing great.
I'm actually ahead of schedule, so I mean, I can actually take it.
Don't worry, we've already filled that time.
Well, so the June 26th thing on South Downtown, is something going to go out to the people who were on the various South Downtown working groups over the years, so they know that's happening?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just looking at Layla. Yes, there is.
Good. Just there's been a kind of a diverse group over the years.
Yeah, and the design is going to have to change. The original design took us taking major encroachments into private property, and we simply can't do that. So we're having to redesign it into a smaller footprint, but we're trying to keep the aesthetic, we're trying to keep the experience on the site. And we are also continuing conversations about shade. So trying to figure out shade as well. And we recognize that trees are going in, but it's going to be a very long time before they are large enough. So we're working through it.
And we also have an issue with access to the Coho Point property.
Also true. A discussion for another day. We've always had a problem with the Coho Point, with their Black Rock location.
Because they're going to probably need to.
We will get into that in another situation. But for right now, that's part of what complicates us, is just making sure that we don't plan the footprint for spaces that we may not have.
Is that lot going to be used as, I heard that lot, what you guys were talking about using that lot, the
Staging
Coho Point as
for-
staging or parking for,
Correct.
for work, construction employees?
Yes, so that we can keep people from parking or the stalls on Main Street.
Right, so that is working out. That's good.
Thank you to everyone involved. There's a large group of staff people who are making sure that as much as possible we're keeping flow of traffic throughout this experience. I'm actually really surprised by the information that we're keeping Washington open in both directions. It's not where we were a week ago. So I appreciate that everybody's just trying to make sure that all these pieces connect. But while we have the space, we should use it. And that is a great option right now.
So go ahead.
No.
In kind of closing, I was going to mention too, because Kelly said she would ask. You guys have to ask. So all of those projects that I just identified, they total $12.3 million over the next year of construction. So.
Wow.
So I can't stop the SAFE fund.
It's a lot.
And just so everyone is very clear, we'll be doing I start that bond process this week. We are expected to have the sale of the bonds by the end of the month.
Any other questions?
No. Excellent job.
Thank you very much.
you.
Yeah, excellent. All right, next up we have the Housing Affordability Strategic Plan, the draft discussion with Flores and team.
And just so everyone knows, I think I said it on air, but Wilder Parks is on the budget committee for the county, and so she is running behind. She is going to be here probably closer to 5:30. Thanks.
Where are you at?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Alma Flores, and I serve as the Community Development Director. I want to first thank the folks that assisted us through this process in developing the city's first housing affordability strategic plan. We are on the final legs of this draft, and I hope you are pleased with this, and I look forward to the questions and comments that you might have. First of all, Ann Ober, our city manager, has been instrumental in moving this product forward. Denny Egner, planning director, has also been part of this great work. David Leviton, as the senior planner on staff, has been assisting me throughout the process, and I've enjoyed working with him on this particular one. Of course, our consultants at PSU, thank you, Liza, who is with me here, Sheila Martin, who's joining us in the Peanut Gallery, and Ryan Winterberg-Lip, who helped develop the profiles online that you'll possibly see at the end of this presentation. The Housing Advisory Working Group, which was a group of technical experts in the arena of affordable housing, as well as workforce development and other subfields. Mike Andrews with Structure PDX, Steve Bartol, Chief of Police, Vahid Brown with Clackamas County, Bridget Daisy of the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, Betty Dominguez with Home Forward, Luke Straight, our captain, Stephen McMurtry with Northwest Housing Alternatives, Mary Rain O'Meara with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County, Pam Fawn with Community Alliance of Tenants, which I believe we have a representative from CAT, Chuck Robbins with Clackamas County Housing and Community Development, Kim Travis of the Oregon Housing and Community Services. So as you can see or hear from that long list, we had quite the crew of experts join us and help us formulate this wonderful plan that I think is before you tonight or this evening. This has been a wonderful expert working with these technical experts and the community informing the work that you see before you. This has been ongoing over the past year. We've had multiple meetings, working group meetings with our advisory group, and 3 main goals came out of that, as well as 30 actions. And actually at the end of this PowerPoint, you'll see one more addition, so we'll actually possibly be up to 31 actions. This is to help support your council goal on housing affordability and addressing that important need in our community. I hope you're pleased with it. A summary of the next 2-year actions, however, will be for you at the final draft, at the adoption of it, so that you can see which items would be or actions would be taken care of in the first 2 years of this plan and summarized in an executive summary. Liza will walk you through the actions and the timeline, and we'll answer any questions that you have. We have the one item that you'll see from the Workforce Partnership on a workforce item to be included as 2.11, but we'll talk about that at the end. And I should note that this is a final draft. It will be graphically represented for the final adoption with pictures, and we'll make sure that there's City of Milwaukee pictures and just more graphically oriented. And we did take note of your suggestions from the last work session in terms of putting some advantages and disadvantages, which you possibly read through, and also giving a sense of how much it would cost, whether it was a no cost because staff would be working on it directly, minimal cost, so it had the representation of a single dollar sign, or high cost, depending on where you're inclined to go toward more high-cost items or no-cost items. That's part of this discussion as well. So anyway, with that, I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Hi, I am Liza Moorhead from the Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies. I've been working on this project for the past few months, and I'd just like to say before I go over the goals what a pleasurable experience it's been to work with the Community Development Department and the members of HOG. Today I would like to share, which is still the funniest work group name that I've ever worked with. Today I just wanted to go over the goals again and some of the actions and make sure that everything that we have reflects the feedback that you gave us at the last meeting, as well as some additional feedback we got from the members of the advisory committee.
And my apologies, it's supposed to not say goal 2 and 3, it's just goal 2, but anyway.
So the goals that we determined would help to meet your objectives around housing affordability are to develop new units, and that those are units across the spectrum of affordability, both to increase the number of new units that are affordable, but also to release some of the market pressure by making sure that people are able to access the housing that best suits their needs. Goal 2 is to prevent displacement and keep affordable units affordable. One of the things that has stood out the most through this whole process is the commitment that Milwaukee has to its working class roots and identity, and making sure that people who are currently calling Milwaukee home can continue to do so if they want to. So we made that an important part of the plan, and goal 3, to connect people to existing affordable housing, both in terms of rental and home ownership. So small. I've developed 3 slides that just show each goal with the actions and whether they are short, near, or long-term strategies. Short-term being 6 to 18 months, near-term 18 to 36 months, and long-term 3 to 5 years. I know that everyone's had a chance to see these actions, most of them a couple times. So I just wanted to give an opportunity if anyone has additional comments or concerns about anything under the Goal 1 actions. It's like a test.
And in the plan, there were several subsets of each to sort of outline specific actions, sub-actions, if you will. These are the overarching.
And for these, hopefully each of the advantages and disadvantages that we identified in the plan will help future decision-making around them easier. So for goal 2, prevent displacement and keep affordable units affordable. And I think there's a question about action 2.6 or a comment.
So there was a reference to Evicted. The mayor brought up that book and some actions that were related to that. I think 2.6 has some elements of that, but we'll explore additional ones. But specifically 2.6.1, let me just finish that 1 second. 2.6.3, explore monitoring and developing habitability standards that will be enforced through a property owner database. So I just wanted to make sure that you...
Yeah, to take that a step further, another thing that I've been thinking about, particularly given what's likely to occur in the next legislative session, I don't know if we need to find out if it's legal to do so or what the difficulties are. So Tim would actually be here for this part, but to get a database of what people are charging for rents. Because if the legislature passes a rent control, they stop preempting cities from rent control. We need data. We need to know what's rent at now, we're never going to get what it used to be, but what's it at now and what's it changing to, because otherwise we're just shooting in the dark and we'll get, landlords screaming that they're not increasing their rents or that that's too tight or all these things. We need the data to know.
Well, and that's even going to be hard to, that's going to be a big ask because as I understand it, some of the bigger complexes, the rent you get 1 month and the rent you get the next month may go up and it may also go down just depending on how much inventory they have to move. And so they can lower the rent, in a given time frame just because they have more openings. So
perhaps that used to happen.
Yeah, I think that's, from people I know who are looking, I think that's still happening. They're saying like different times of the month and different things, you sometimes can find deals.
So we can add a 2.64 that says explore a rental database to monitor rents and, whether or not the legislature, shifts in some way. We're at least exploring it. We're not saying we're going to. Is there a common
database? Is there a database you can go to now?
No.
That just says,
no.
I'm looking in this area and what are the rents?
The closest you can get is when there is an actual listing.
Search apartments.
So like this,
pull them up and you ask what the rent is, or they might list the rent.
In here you mentioned this one app,
One app,
but that doesn't have that.
That's on the
That's to streamline the process of renting a home. The rental market typically requires that someone apply for each unit or each complex and go through a background check. So One App Fee would be a system that would do a one-stop application fee for multiple listings, which is a huge cost savings for people who are looking to rent. That's different, but yeah. The closest we got to a database, if you will, was CoStar Rental, their rental database, but it's not comprehensive, and it's only when something's being listed. So you have to track it constantly to make sure you're getting an inventory.
This is totally off topic, but I just wanted to check at the, and maybe this was in the housing needs assessment, but I didn't remember the statistic, but at the climate action plan meeting the other night, someone at my table said 40% of Milwaukeeans live in multifamily housing, and that seemed high to me.
Say that again?
They said 40% of Milwaukee residents live in multifamily housing.
40% are renters. 42% are renters, so maybe they're conflating a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Because a lot of our renters live in single-family homes.
But it's still pretty high. It's still 30-something, is that for multifamily?
Those stats range by community on owner-occupied versus the rental market. You can get a 60-40, a 70-30 split.
Those are two different things, right? Owner versus renter. And I thought that website was great, that PSU website with those stats. But multifamily housing versus single-family housing, whether it's owned or rented. This person who was from Clackamas County sustainability group was saying 40% of Milwaukee people live in multifamily housing, because we were talking about the problems with recycling and stuff at multifamily housing, and I just thought that sounded
really
like a high.
I wonder if they're including our UGMA, because we do have a lot more multifamily in our UGMA than we do within city limits, and so
it was in our housing needs assessment.
I don't know if it would have been called out specifically to
Yeah.
David's checking back there. Back here.
Okay.
Do you confirm that?
I remembered it being in the high 30s.
So if I may, do you have a comment on goal 2? I
I
wanted
had
to the
a
fourth.
comment on goal 1, but I guess I was maybe looking and wasn't sure where you were in your. Okay,
Brought it back up.
Okay. It was more in the narrative section. I think it's the language in here under, let's see, 1.14, I think is broad enough to accommodate my concern, but in the narrative around that, it talks about allowing zoning to allow for, specifically it called out things like ADUs and cottage clusters and tiny homes, and I wondered why we didn't also include maybe some middle housing within that language, because I think we've talked a lot about missing middle, but I don't think this document talks very much about missing middle, and that certainly would require some zoning and code changes.
So cottage cluster is considered one of the missing middles, but sort of like a fiveplex.
A fourplex is also considered missing middle, and we don't have.
And like row houses, which kind of got played down in here. I was like, why aren't row houses more?
Because of the intersection with the comp plan, we were trying to allow the public process to happen through the comp plan changes related to those specific.
And that will, but I think that this is part of our conversation, and I wanted to call out middle housing as well.
Yeah.
Where are you?
It was on
4, you said?
So it was
1.4.
Well, 1.14 is the language there is very broad, and so I think that's okay. But how do I get to that after I've made
There was more on cottage clusters.
Here, how about I do this? I'll go back to. Yeah, so on page WS40, it's the second bullet, and it says provisions and incentives for small housing solutions, ADUs, cottage clusters, and tiny homes. I'd like to just simply include another part of affordable, small affordable housing, which is middle housing or missing middle.
Just multiplexes, because it did mention garden apartments, and it did mention cottage clusters, so the only thing left is multiplexes.
Well, I guess
Where are you
attached single
40? You said WS40?
WS40. second bullet.
I see.
We very specifically call out some specific types of housing, and then we just sort of don't. I mean,
yeah, why is
generally
this
saying
small housing and provisions and incentives for small housing and missing middle housing solutions and include.
I think wherever it says small, I'd like it to say small and middle housing.
Yeah.
Great. Great. Thank you.
So also on the first set of goals, add one, if I can get back to it now. On 1.6, develop public lands policy to increase affordable housing development and workforce development opportunities for construction workers. While I absolutely agree with that policy, it seems like a completely different world than housing. You know, it's like job development.
1.6?
Yeah.
Page.
So on page WS17.
Oh, okay.
Goals of
1.6 is also under this.
So we actually intersected those two when we were developing the exclusive negotiating agreement with the Coho project, where we said, could we please help mentor the high schoolers to bring forth more construction. So this is related to that. Through a public-private partnership, we hope to leverage the public benefits.
Okay, cool.
By adding a workforce development component.
I was seeing a whole, like a workforce development program.
You're totally there.
Which I am all excited about.
And keep in mind, we had Bridget Daisy of the Clackamas Workforce Partnership, and she loves this idea, and they get a lot of funding from the Workforce Investment Board that we could help leverage for our community. So it's an opportunity to explore in terms of other funding sources and partnerships.
But we could find ways to make that a little more clear. Yeah,
that'd be great. Thanks.
Well, yeah, if you look at the more detailed breakout on WS22, you do get more of that. But yeah. 1.6.1.
Yes, 1.6.1. So we're on goal 2, but if I may, if you don't have any questions on these, I want to talk about the addition of a 2.11, if you don't have comments on what's here. So we received an email just yesterday from our Clackamas Workforce Partnership partner, Bridget, who recommended adding a 2.11 to build stronger alignment with the workforce development system, again, back to the workforce development subfield, creating a greater partnership with them in terms of making sure people have the appropriate training, sort of the wraparound services that they need to be successful in life. Much of what we may be seeing as a result of the economic upturn is, not everyone is evenly getting, the benefit of that. And how can we at least play a part in that distribution of resources, if you will, and being a little more equitable in terms of how resources are being leveraged, perhaps using the affordability, the housing affordability strategy to get us there. Again, a lot of the words we're saying is like explore and create or provide. They're verbs that at least connote some action, but they don't mean that this is exactly what will happen at the end. So is this something that we want to see as an additional action item?
Absolutely. Actually, it's interesting that came up. Mr. Dugan from PCC yesterday at the governor's budget talk, whatever that was called, came up to me afterwards and he said, we need employees and we'll train. I mean, it don't even have to have a high school diploma. We will train people.
And where is he from?
PCC, Precision Cast Parts.
Oh, wow.
Which are good jobs.
Yeah.
Those are like serious jobs, that career kind of jobs, and they'll train fully.
And I should point out that the Clackamas Workforce Partnership has on-the-job training funds that it could then be leveraged with that employer. And then consequently, one could make a request to for partnerships down the line for development of housing.
Right,
For the
so I
workforce.
guess what I'm wondering about is what's our communication device by which we connect our citizens to these opportunities? Right? How do we get that out to them so that they know that this is happening?
And that's why I want this partnership with Clackamas, workforce partnership, to help get us there, because they are that conduit.
Okay.
And I think there's a clear tie-in with housing.
And, I mean, also, I hope PCC is speaking to CCC, to Clackamas
They're
Community
doing all
College.
kinds of things. They're getting ready to put up billboards.
Yeah,
I asked them to give me a little half pager. I said, we'll put it in the pilot.
yeah,
Let me.
yeah. Hand it out at the farmer's market, or whatever, yeah.
So we'll add 2.11.
Yeah.
That's okay with you?
Yep.
Great.
And then we just have actions around goal 3. So on WS 39, page 34, 3.6 is just a typo, I guess. It's just incomplete. It just says partner with. Oh, no. With everybody.
We're trying to keep this as broad as we can. Maximum flexibility.
All the people. All the people. So we'll fix it.
That just got cut off.
So, yeah, not on part 3, but on your appendix B, where you talk about the working groups. In the narrative at the top, you say there were 5, but then you only list and discuss 4. So is the 5th one a Spanish language one? Is that what it was?
Yes, there were 2 tenant groups,
Okay.
one in English and one in Spanish.
Okay, is that made clear? I think it was. I did not. I missed that.
The unfortunate part is that no one showed up to the Spanish-speaking focus group.
Oh.
So that's why we don't have like
Any
summary notes
description.
from the
Okay. I mean, I was thinking that it would be nice to know, although I kind of wavering a little bit, but I was thinking it would be nice to have those discussions of those groups kind of highlight how many people were there, and sort of a range of, like for the landlords, they were from, small, mom and pops to big apartment buildings or whatever, to kind of give a sense of who was there and how many were, participating.
Okay.
I think that would be nice to have. And I loved that, in fact, I could have spent all day, except I wouldn't have gotten the rest of the package read, but that website that you provide.
I'm going to pull that up
Yeah.
for us, just to, since we do have 5 minutes.
I mean, there was
Wasn't sure if we were
so
gonna
many
have-
interesting, I just looked at 3 neighborhoods, and just looking at the population density difference and the owner-occupied difference, like Island Station has really low owner-occupied, and Linwood has very high owner-occupied.
And that's based on, isn't that 2010 census information?
It is that part of
Okay,
it.
so it's not.
Because I would have thought Island
think
Station
that's
is
true.
all owner occupied.
Well, Island Station has had a number of rental units
Right.
go
I didn't
to,
realize
be
that.
purchased over the years, but
You can just
I still,
Huh.
it's interesting to have a plan.
yeah, it was very,
Yeah.
it was very interesting.
both and kind of make it.
And the racial, makeup and everything, yeah.
Yeah, and so we'll be able to update that part of it in a couple of years when the new decennial
Yeah.
census comes
So
out.
this is the neighborhood pulse, and we'll choose a neighborhood. And so some demographics for that neighborhood.
Which one is it? Oh, Hector Campbell.
Hector Campbell.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the population distribution, the racial and ethnic makeup of the neighborhood, and then in the non-white population, some specifics and comparisons to Portland and to, we need to change that to Milwaukee, and to the entire MSA.
Oh, do you have the Milwaukee, so you're gonna change
We're
that
gonna,
to be-
sub in the Milwaukee
Oh,
numbers.
that'd be awesome.
Instead of Portland MSA.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep Portland MSA, but we'll have the neighborhood Milwaukee and
Oh.
the MSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area. We also look at population density, and again, that will be subbed out with Milwaukee, owner-occupied. And then we also have some data that's going to go at the top of the profile that has the number of housing units and some other more specific, instead of demographic information about the people who live there, more information about the actual housing units that are there. So we have those, but they haven't made it up onto the website
Housing
yet.
units is different than number of households.
They're usually the same because a household lives in a housing unit, but looking at the building stock, so is it a single family house, information like that.
So we even have statistics on the Milwaukee business industrial, but we don't have
Very few people.
So yeah. So we're hoping to come before you on June 19th with an adoption and a resolution, and I crafted a draft resolution if you were all comfortable with that resolution. Any changes?
The only thing I would add is the title just says Milwaukee resolution.
Oh yeah, because it was just...
So I would say to do whatever it is, adopt a...
So Scott
Resolution
was
for-
wonderful and created that little template for me, so it would be cleaned up and look formal. For sure.
Hope the resolution looked good and the report is, you guys have put an incredible amount of work into this. I think you've done a fantastic job.
Thank you. Yeah. Great.
Thank you. There are a few items that are not on the agenda for tonight, so I wanted to just disclose what those are. We've been working on an open streets meeting coming up with the community. We wanted to bring it back to a public meeting so that we could have some dialogue around some issues revolving the name. And we also have Tim here to talk a little bit about tonight, since this is the first application we've had for an appeal that actually reflects back to a city project. So we're going to give him a few minutes just to talk about that as well. So I'm going to let Kelly go first, then she can take a quick break.
Good evening. This will be quick. For the folks watching, I'm Kelly Brooks, Assistant City Manager, and I just wanted to have a quick conversation with you all about the naming for the Open Streets event for 2019. We have a meeting scheduled on June 18th, and one of the items for an engagement opportunity is to help weigh in on a name. I had some emails back and forth with you all, and thank you so much for reading them and weighing in. I got a lot of great input. The last option I had teed up was 3 names, Open Streets, Cyclovia, and Belawaki, which were the 3 we had in the mix, with falling back to Open Streets and Cyclovia as the 2 that would move ahead. I heard concerns still even with including more than Open Streets. Primarily, Councilor Falconer had real concerns about anything other than the Open Streets name not being inclusive enough to anybody that would want to participate. And so I think the real question for you all tonight is, we have plenty of things to talk about, how to engage in the event, how do you want to volunteer, what are the routes we're looking at. We have more to talk about than just the name. But at this point, if there are strong concerns that I'm hearing, which I have heard, about anything other than Open Streets, we would take the naming portion out and just say the name of the event is Open Streets. We had gone with options because that had been something we believed you all wanted us to do to help engage the community. So we'd be pulling that back. So I just wanted to give you all a chance to talk to each other, not through me, and see if that's the direction that you want to move in.
So when you're doing something like this, you have to market it. You have to make some buzz around it. You have to get people talking about it. It has to be something that when you reference it, you know what the heck you're talking about. And something like Open Streets is so generic. It's like that's a category, right? Open Streets is what these events are all over the world, in cities all over the world. They're the Open Streets event, but they all name them something.
And some of them do name them
That's
open
not,
streets.
yeah, they don't all name.
No.
There are a lot of them called
Most of them.
Open Streets Phoenix or something of that nature.
Most of them
Open
that
Streets
I
Milwaukee?
do. And from a standpoint of creating buzz around it and creating interest in having people talk about it, I think a unique name is going to be much more useful, and I don't think that it's going to, people on scooters are going to go, oh, I can't go because that's...
I'm not worried about people on scooters. I'm worried about people who have mobility issues in general. I'm worried about people that I saw on the route the last 2 years in wheelchairs or on crutches or on any other modes, or walkers, or folks who didn't really walk it or roll it or do any of those things. They simply walked out of their front door and danced in the street for the 5 minutes that their legs were capable of letting them do it. I think that a name, if we go with a unique name, it has to be all-inclusive. It cannot be Velowalkie or Cyclovia or something that is specific and exclusive to only one mode of using this route. If there are other names that are inclusive of everyone who's allowed to use this, I would be all for it. The only thing I could come up with was Welcome to Milwaukee, because I am just not the person to be naming this event.
So what I heard Mark say in the beginning was that you need something that people know and understand and can figure out what it is, and that it's marketable. And then you said, and Open Streets is known throughout everywhere. Well, then what's the problem with that? People will know exactly what it is, and we could brand it in our own, Open Streets Milwaukee, Open Streets whatever, but I agree with you. If it has a terminology that speaks to some other mode of transportation, that's what people will assume that it is. And those words are not the easiest to say, nor for a lot of people to understand. So I'm a strong advocate of open streets. So.
Oh, see, and I think it's as boring as can be.
It's okay. If you can come up with something,
then come up with something.
So I like that.
You can call it Wild Milwaukee.
Think about Sunday Parkways. Think about the
Wild
name.
Streets.
Think about the name Sunday Parkways. It doesn't say cycle. It doesn't say walk. It doesn't say anything.
Right.
People had to learn what Sunday Parkways meant.
But they were words that people understood to begin with, and they were...
What's a parkway?
That might mean driving on, parkways are highways.
Well, I think your point is that Cyclovia or Velowalkie might not be very easy for people to say out loud unless they've heard it before. Is that what you're saying?
True, and that we have to consider, well, more than the 21,000 people in Milwaukee. The average person out there, the average, what you write to as you're writing like a newspaper article or a book or a, whatever, and have terminology that all of the people that we know, or all of the people that may have an interest would have some understanding of what that means, and I had to look up words, and
I do think, I think actually both Cyclovia and Open Streets are kind of insider names that people, like I went to their conference when they brought all these people who do this to PSU a couple summers ago, and they are words that are used in that realm, but actually you even say open streets to a person in Milwaukee, and I don't think they necessarily are going to know what that means.
Well, they might not. No, that's true. They might not. But what if it's like walk? I'm not saying it should be this, but Walk Milwaukee Day or something like that. Or not Walk Milwaukee, because then people would think it's all about walking.
See, that's the dilemma.
And that's why I like the word open. These streets are open for anything you want to do. And if you want to dance in front, if you want to have a
that's why I liked the Skookum name, because it carries no baggage either way. It's not walking, it's not riding. People are like, what is Skookum anyway? Because I do think, I had the same concern that some of them were too riding centric. But I think you could do Velowalkie, and you could spell the walkie W-A-L-K-I-E.
still have the same problem with it's exclusive. It's only
And
been
it's
talking about
walking.
biking and walking. It's
Right,
not,
it's like
it's
walk,
still
and
not
walking,
open
and
to
people think it's just
other
walking.
modes. It's like a,
So
it makes it
let's
sound
talk
like it's
for a
some
minute.
sort of a, like
Let's talk for a minute about what's the base thing. So what happens? I mean, aside from naming it open streets, we want people to participate physically in some way or another. They ride bicycles, they walk, they ride scooters, they get out and dance, they do whatever. And our street is closed for vehicular traffic, so it's open to other modes of whatever. So brainstorm, mindstorm, what other words come up?
Car free. You could call it car free.
There you go.
Car free Sunday.
Are we doing it on a Sunday?
Yeah,
And
are we committed to
car free
Sundays?
is
I thought we pretty much committed to Sunday because that was
Yeah.
easiest from traffic management.
Yeah.
We're looking at Sundays. I didn't.
Oh, yeah,
We hadn't.
yeah.
We didn't have car free on the list, but
Well, and Car Free Sunday has kind of a ring to it too. You can say that, you can do it, you can dance it, you can sing it, you can, something like that.
It does highlight the one thing you don't want highlighted for the day.
Which is the cars can't drive on.
Oh, I don't know. I actually think that might actually be really important to highlight, because last year we had, quite a few people who didn't understand that they were not going to be allowed to drive on the street. And Lisa and I had to direct traffic a couple of times, and a couple of people were pretty angry about that. So if it's obvious that you are not going to be able to drive on this day, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Car free works for me.
Or car no.
No car Sunday.
No car Sunday, yeah. That's like, oh, what kind of Sunday is that?
It's not my favorite, but we all have different strong opinions. Well, I'm
that's why the brainstorming is good.
Wilda and Angel camp that I like the inclusivity that I don't think you find in some of those other names. I get the marketing idea, but I want to be able to say something that people know roughly what it means. Sunday Parkways, they've worked hard to get there. We could get there. We could be Milwaukee Parkway. We could be Milwaukee Sunday. It could be something that's added on to that, but Skookum, which is interesting that was your favorite, because it's my least favorite.
I thought about cartoon characters.
I like the fact that it's a Chinookian word, and we need to do more to recognize our the native past here.
But if you're doing an event that requires education, that one would require a lot of education, more so than open streets to me.
It's a lot of education, and we would feel like we would need to do this correctly.
Yeah, we'd have to actually reach out to the tribe.
Actually makes this an event. It highlights that.
That would be kind of a token if we.
So I would just say that it's only, there's the name, and then there's also the visuals that go with the name and the tagline that goes with the name. And so I would say this is one part of it. It didn't fully address your concerns, but we could certainly have a tagline to any of these, for all people, for, all modes. Essentially what you wrote me back to your email, like this is for everyone. We can represent the different modes in the logo. I mean, there's things we can do to make these different things more inclusive. I think it really does come down to if the message is really more all about kind of the active transportation and access to the streets, you name it open streets. If you are looking to this event to be a marketing opportunity for the city, actually having a more unique name that we have to explain that connects it to Milwaukee helps. It's easier to sell the city that way. So I think that's probably, we didn't kind of define that path from the very beginning. But really all I need from today is naming is hard. We've been thinking about it for a long time. If we're at that place where it's really open streets, and that's okay, I'm okay with that, then we would just not take the naming that piece to this meeting, and we would just proceed. So.
Well, I think the more minds, the merrier, as long as we get the final say. So that way we don't end up with whatever that sponge face, whatever that is.
Right.
Voting yes, right. And I can do that. I mean, yes, we can have that be go talk, get engagement from that group, and then bring back the feedback we got. I had sort of promised not to take anything to that group that was really strongly opposed by any of you. So.
Well, and I guess if we're going to bring that to this, if we're going to bring that part of the discussion to the meeting, I would want it to be very clear that names that are exclusive are just not going to be considered, at least. And if that's the consent, if that's the majority vote here, then I would like that to be part of the way that it's presented at this meeting.
But you can
it's not going to include the word bike. It's not going to include the word, it's not going to be exclusive. Because
I think that my request, if we're at that point, is that we not set up a false dichotomy where the committee is not truly making a decision.
No, they're just coming up with ideas.
But
So
didn't
I've
we
been
do
through
that on the,
before,
we
and I
did that
would
over
really
Facebook?
prefer not to actually do that ever again.
Yeah.
So if this were up to me, I would like us to
if they suggest it.
either have this group have names that we're putting forward and they're weighing in on, and we're fine with all the names, or not have them name this. So.
Because we did solicit names, right,
Yes,
over
yeah.
Facebook?
We did.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, we have 2 that I've heard tonight. We've had staff working on this for a significant amount of time, and they've been unable to come up with things that work for everybody. I'd really like this to either just go forward with a single name, or we can do the car-free, if you guys want us to put car-free Milwaukee out there. But I wouldn't, if it's not something that works for this body, I wouldn't take it forward.
I kind of like Car-Free Sunday because it's like Carefree Sunday.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's kind of this,
Kind
you
of
can
play
play
off on
this.
that. Yeah, and it gives sort of this fun feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can do a lot with that
do the-
graphic.
Could actually call it Carefree.
Could we call it
Sunday.
Carefree? Yeah,
And then,
I feel like
And then the
with
tagline,
the type,
car-free.
with the type
It's different for car.
C-A-R, little e.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That'd be really cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it gives
Yeah.
a sense of the joy of it, right?
I'm okay with that. I
Me
think
too.
that's-
I like that.
Just had to
a lot.
convene us.
Great. Open streets and carefree Sundays.
So I would say,
Is that what I've got?
don't take names to the group.
Well,
That's
we
our
could bring
name.
open and carefree.
Just take
Yeah,
both and
Just
see
take
what
those
people
two.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
But we can represent the care as the car piece, and we'll figure a little bit of that out, and we'll talk to them about it, come back to you.
Yeah, I like the visual of the car part being bigger and, or a different font, and then the E and free being, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. Yeah.
Okay,
Good job.
good.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
That was easy.
That was funny. Okay, second piece of this is now Tim talking about what we're doing tonight.
Okay. This could be titled "The 4 Things the City Attorney Would Like You to Know About Land Use Appeals." We will probably use tonight. There are many others that we'd like to
I've
talk
never
about.
wanted to know that.
You may have questions about other topics, and we can certainly get into those, but I want to talk at a minimum about bias disclosures that you're going to be making tonight. Second, how to process an objection based upon bias. Third, what's the standard of review? That's kind of a legalistic way of saying how broad is your discretion to make a different decision than the Planning Commission did, including changing conditions. And then fourth would be keeping the case on the record, which is what we're supposed to be doing. So, with respect to bias, many of you have been involved in the process of developing this project, and I've got a couple of statements specifically from members of the committee to make. But essentially, there's 2 things that you want to think about. One is, in your prior work on this project, did you learn some facts that would be important for people to know that are not in the record? And hopefully your answer to that is no. Things that I would consider relevant to this case are things that are already in the record.
Things that are relevant to the appeal.
The appeal,
Okay.
that's right, the criteria in the case. Okay. So you may know a whole lot of things about the project, but what's important are the things that are relevant to the appeal.
Right, okay.
The other is, to the extent that you have worked on the project before, to be able to check your conscience and conclude that nothing that you learned before about it would prevent you from doing your job of objectively measuring the facts against the criteria and reaching a fair decision. I mean, ultimately, everybody in the room is entitled to an impartial tribunal, and the question is, can you still do that despite your knowledge? And there's nothing in the law that says the fact that you are familiar with something or even worked on it automatically bars you. It's a specific question based upon what's your opinion about your own ability to do that. So once you make a disclosure, we could get an objection. Someone has the right to say, I want to come forward and I'd like you to not participate because I think you're biased. At that point, the member or members of the council who have had that allegation made are entitled to make a statement again, if they wish to, provide more detail, either withdrawing if you wish to, or making the case for why you think you have a clear conscience. And at that point, we have a vote. And the others who have not been challenged would vote on whether to include a person that has been challenged on the panel to hear the case. And that's how the system resolves the question. And then once that vote's taken, we move on.
And so so that's that line in the script about, does anyone challenge the ability of any member of the planning commission?
That's right. If we hear I do, then we're going to go into a process of voting.
If there's more than one, so you're saying the other council members vote to determine if
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there any issue where if a person were found to have so much bias that they voted not to, that person gets to vote on the next person?
That is a great question. I don't know of a case that resolves that. It seems to me that if we're lucky, the challenge would be to only 2 individuals, and we could have a vote of the remaining 3, and then we'd be really safe. I think it wouldn't be. Then we wouldn't have anybody who was challenged actually voting. Now, if the numbers don't work out that way, we're going to be forced, I think, to say, rule of necessity, we have to have a decision here, and we're going to recruit everybody who has, we're going to vote one at a time. Yeah.
Good thing nobody's missing today.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, so on that point, I mean, cities develop, they build libraries, they build police stations in city halls, and obviously, they assign members of the council to be involved and sort of as a liaison on those task forces. Generally speaking, in your experience, is that usually grounds for removing someone from a hearing?
In my experience, people who've been involved in the development of the project typically will be able to distinguish that commitment to the commitment to be a judge.
Okay, so it would be unusual for one of us to recuse ourselves, or for this body to say, no, I'm sorry, you're too biased, you can't participate.
But you still might have someone in the audience who...
Oh, sure. I just want to have a sense for, at the end of when we get through, when we get through that conversation, if...
I do think it's something we have to think about in the future, about having more than one on a working group, frankly.
So you're suggesting in the future think about only having one person who's a liaison to a committee, and having
on projects or on,
and having them be a liaison.
Well, no, I mean legislative. We don't have a bias issue for things that are legislative, like the comp plan,
but for potential
land use projects. I think, it's probably a cautionary tale.
Okay, moving on to the breadth of your discretion to decide the case. Our standard is hybrid. It says de novo on the record. Typically, a de novo case doesn't have that limitation. So we're going to do our best, and I'll talk about that, to sort of keep it to the record. But the fact that it says de novo means that you can decide this case as if there weren't a decision below. You could decide it anew. You can decide it as if you were facing it for the first time. So you have wide latitude to find the facts differently than the Planning Commission did, or to interpret the law differently, or to impose a different set of conditions. The fact that it's de novo, though, doesn't mean that you are required to ignore the fact that a very able Planning Commission spent a lot of time on the case and reached certain conclusions. You might find their findings to be very persuasive, and you can say that. That's quite legitimate in a de novo case to say, I haven't heard anything tonight that changes my reliance on the analysis of the Planning Commission, except I think we should change this condition, or we should do something different here. That's perfectly legitimate under a de novo standard. So, no questions about that. You have wide latitude here. Now, how to keep the case on the record. The attractive thing conceptually to on-the-record appeals is that they're supposed to be easier to conduct because you're not going to have new testimony, you're not going to have new issues. As a practical matter, they're hard to police, and that's the downside of them.
Oh, that's just one of the downsides of them.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there are many others, but pluses and minuses of both these systems. But one of the worst is, what if there's a really new idea for resolving a problem, and it requires a drawing to understand it, and you can't get it. So I mean, in that case, we'd probably recommend that you remand it to the Planning Commission to get the drawing and bring it back. It's cumbersome. But anyway, that's what we have. As a practical matter, what we do generally is let people testify, raise their issues, make their arguments, and then rely on our staff to keep track of the places where people have gone off the rails. And we try to give you some comments and say, this particular discussion was not in the Planning Commission, this one wasn't either, and ask you to disregard those things you've heard. It becomes impossible really to run it like a judicial proceeding where people object and get rulings from the bench, and it just becomes impractical as a process. I've seen it attempted, but it's painful to watch. So that's what working with staff will try to do. So those are kind of the four things that I'm pretty sure will come up. Are there other things that strike you as possible? I mean, it's hard to really know, but...
And we only deal with the issues that were raised in the appeal.
Great question.
Other issues.
Great question. Because it's a de novo hearing, people can raise anything they like. I mean, they're confined to the factual record, but they might come up with new creative arguments based upon those facts. So I think that one of the things that kind of doesn't fit in our code is that we require people to identify grounds of appeal, and then we say it's a de novo appeal. I think the de novo part of it trumps the rest.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you can...
He's not held to the things he brought in his appeal?
You
could the limit of what he's appealing?
This is your code, and if you interpret it that way and we get an appeal, I will defend it that way, and my defense will be that you are entitled to deference in interpreting your code, and I'll do my best to say that it is the part of our code that says you have to identify your grounds that count, and the de novo part's less important. But I can't tell you we'll win that.
But legally, that may be...
I mean, that's basic pleading, though. I mean, that's just basic pleading in any legal context, is you can't come to oral argument and make new arguments that you didn't plead in your basic, in your appeal pleading.
Because staff hasn't had time to address any of this.
If we were to write a consistent appeal process, I might write it differently.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it's a very good conversation to have about whether you really want on the record appeals and how much latitude to raise.
In the future, we need to, as a council, think about this appeal process, because this is a place that Lisa and I strongly disagree, but as a planning commissioner, I found the system that the council used really poor, because a lot of times when somebody's coming to the planning commission, this is their first time ever they've sat before any kind of body like this and ever had any kind of conversation. Like, they have no idea what they're doing. So they come in, they kind of say what it is they think they are trying to do, and then it goes all south on them because they didn't know the code, they didn't know the ways to say it, they didn't know the parameters to put it in, and then they figure that out because they go, why didn't anybody, and then they come back to the city council and, oh no, you're not allowed to enter any of that new information. But if I would have just said that this pipe goes through then it would have been okay. But no, that's new information you're not allowed to bring to council.
I think that's not the cases that get appealed. The cases that get appealed are cases with representation, are cases brought by...
This doesn't have representation.
Well, the opponent doesn't, but the applicant does.
The frustrating cases to me are the ones where there's a battle at the planning commission and then the parties actually sit down and talk. That leads to conversation that should have happened earlier, but finally it happens, and they come up with a solution. They come up with a modification.
They can't bring it.
And now you can't talk about it.
Right.
But they could, okay. Well, I mean, I don't want to, I think this is a long discussion because...
Anyway, this is a conversation I think this council needs to have and sort that out one way or the other, because I do think our system's broken. For whatever that's worth.
So, good luck tonight.
Thanks.
We'll help all we can.
We have executive session.
Do we? Okay.
Yes.
On adjournment of the work session, council will meet in executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute ORS 192.6602A to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. And now we are adjourned from the work session.
Okay, and while we are adjourned, so Nancy at the library asked me if I would please give these to my fellow members.